Warning, the following is not intended to glorify drug abuse or the use of drugs. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. All opinions expressed are strictly my own and should not be used as an authoritative source of information regarding psychedelics. If you consume drugs, please be safe, be smart, and be healthy. If you or someone you know is currently struggling with addiction, seek immediate help or dial the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988, the 24/7 hotline for emotional and substance use support. I have done NN-DMT many different times around different people and different places at different doses. It is one of the most powerful psychedelics on Earth. It is the main psychoactive ingredient in ayahuasca brew, a traditional shamanic psychedelic that is used at certain retreats in South America and Costa Rica. Many people believe that the psychedelic helps them. I will be talking about NN-DMT and how it has helped me personally. I do not recommend that every single person use DMT. What I will suggest, however, is that most people consider trying DMT or at least educate themselves on DMT so they can be better influenced and understand the effects of DMT, what it does to an individual, and its benefits on society, and the cons of doing it based on your individual circumstance. What is it like to do DMT? It is a very difficult experience to articulate with verbal communication. It's hard to put into words exactly what it's like when you are in this psychedelic state. When you consume DMT, it is interacting with your brain in a way, like with most psychedelics, that contributes to neuroplasticity. You're creating new neural pathways in your brain. It makes your brain more flexible. I want to discuss the visual aspects of DMT. When you ingest DMT, in the way, say, Terence McKenna would describe using DMT, you take 3 to 4 deep inhales, you hold in your chest. This is if you are vaping it in, say, a oil burner pipe, which is most commonly associated with methamphetamine use. You can vape DMT in one of these pipes. When you vaporize DMT and you inhale the vapor and you hold it for about 20 seconds each time you inhale, you undergo a type of temporary comatose state. If you have the strength to keep your eyes open, the experience is different, and I have experienced DMT after a few inhales with my eyes open. The visuals are nothing short of fascinating, but for the most part, the sedative effects of DMT lead you to want to kind of just lay down and just close your eyes and accept this feeling that's washing over you. When you do that, the closed eye visuals begin. The feelings of a physical manifestation of leaving your body or becoming apart from yourself, observing yourself, having an out-of-body experience, or shifting into an alternate dimension. You see hyperbolic geometry, patterns, and colors, and you feel like you're in this new place. Me, I often feel like I'm in 2 separate places at once. Again, it's very difficult to describe. I feel like I'm in my body. I am kind of present in the fact that I'm laying down on my bed having a psychedelic experience, while also being aware that what I'm seeing feels so real, as if I am moving through this alternate reality. Oftentimes it feels like I'm just being showcased a type of reality that I am unable to stay in permanently, just being shown temporarily. I do not personally subscribe to the belief that when you ingest DMT, you are interacting with actual aliens, external entities that are external from the human mind. I believe that, like with most drugs, it is interacting with you as an individual on your own individual level, on your own, in your own unique brain. And everything you experience can sometimes be inferred rather than exactly the same. Some people will say that they have the exact same experiences when they take DMT with a friend or a loved one. My wife and I have taken DMT before, and we have never had the exact same experiences. I have taken it, then she would take it. We have different experiences, not the same. I'm not discounting the very real anecdote that some people have very similar, if not exactly the same, hallucinogenic experiences while doing DMT with a friend or a loved one. But that is not enough evidence for me to believe that we're actually communicating with aliens or touching some particular alternate dimension that is innate to the universe. DMT being a part of the universe and a molecule that you can consume and alter your perception in the same way you can drink alcohol or smoke marijuana and alter your perception in the ways that these particular drugs will. I'm not pretentious enough to say that DMT is not a drug, bro. Everything, literally everything, is a drug. It provides us with euphoria. Comfort foods give you endorphins or dopamine. And dopamine in and of itself it's drug-like in nature. It's a chemical that's released in your brain, and it makes you feel good. I digress. While in the psychedelic state, you can hear voices. You feel like you're receiving external messages from almost alien beings, or a consciousness that is apart from you. The experiences you have can be very, very deep and emotionally triggering. I say triggering in a sense not in the fact that you are going to become traumatized from these experiences. I myself have never been traumatized by a DMT experience, and I have used it a lot. I have never screwed up my brain. I have never felt like I've been in a permanent trip. I've never felt like, oh, I went to DMT land and then came back and everything felt different. I never experienced psychosis from DMT. Now, that's not to say that there aren't certain individuals who may or may not experience psychosis from DMT. Again, there's not enough evidence to support the idea that people use DMT once and then mess up their brain permanently. There's no evidence to suggest that that's true. Again, I've used DMT many, many times. In fact, I have used DMT once. I took DMT once a night for 6 days straight. And afterwards, I was still me. I didn't feel like I was a different person. I didn't feel messed up from it. I didn't feel like I had some kind of lasting negative effect from DMT. Now, granted, the doses I was using, it was probably about 50 milligrams per night when I did it every day for about a week. I have only ever vaporized DMT. I have never drank ayahuasca brew. So I can't speak to the experience on the level of ayahuasca, but I can say that when you drink ayahuasca, you are having a longer perceptual effect. You're being influenced by DMT for longer, more like for hours at a time at these ayahuasca ceremonies, at these retreats, than you are when you say you take it in your home, you vaporize it, you're gone, your lights out for about 10, 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes tops. I have never had a trip that has lasted more than 10 minutes. I honestly have not. Not a trip where I'm like lights out and like laying in bed for like 10 minutes straight. The longest I could say that I've gone is about 6 to 7 minutes. The experiences that I have had while on DMT are nothing short of fascinating and, at best, godlike and awe-inspiring. I am an atheist and I do not subscribe to any human religion. I wouldn't really consider myself that spiritual, but using psychedelics, I have used psilocybin mushrooms in the past. Using psychedelics like DMT and like psilocybin bring me closer to the experience of spirituality than, say, if I went into a church, read the Bible, and clasped my hands together and prayed to God. I don't believe in any Abrahamic faith. I could be swayed. I could be open to the. Again, I'm not really agnostic. I don't believe that any man made deity exists. I do not subscribe to the notion that human beings have discovered anything that could suggest an actual creator of the universe. Having said that, using DMT is the closest I would have come to God, if I could put it into those words. The last time I did DMT, which was very recent in DMT, I started speaking another language. There is an actual term for this. It's a thing that happens, especially while under the DMT state. It's almost like I was speaking in tongues, but involuntarily. To me, it almost felt like I was speaking Hebrew fluently, but I can't really say for certain that it was Hebrew. It felt like a very ancient language was being channeled through me, and I was just speaking it fluently. And it was all completely involuntary. After speaking this language for about 30 seconds to a minute, I just started laughing impulsively and out of control. I was clasping my hands in such emotional bliss that it was unlike anything I had experienced before. Another similar experience I had where I was speaking involuntarily, I was laying in my bed and I felt myself like zooming out from my body and leaving it behind, and I just let it go. And then I became infinity. It's the best way I can describe it. I became everything, or a part of everything, and I just kept zooming out and further out and further out. And I started uttering the word everything. 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 No experience is the same. There are literally infinite amounts of experiences you can have while under the DMT state. Another experience I had was facing my shadow. While having this particular experience, I felt reverted to a child or a baby in a crib, the state of a newborn being. I saw colors and shapes that I was trying to figure out what they were. It was like looking at blocks or the up-close graphics of a video game, and not really seeing much aside from just simple geometry. But then, this experience led to something even deeper. A dark, ethereal being, a kind of humanoid in form but chaotic in structure, grabs me and pulls me through life, reprimanding me almost, and challenging me on everything I feel and everything I think and everything I believe about myself and who I am and what I've done. It was a very intense experience, probably one of the most intense experiences I've had under DMT. Immediately after this experience was the first time I cried. I was full of mixed emotions. My hands were shaking after this experience because it was so powerful and so intense. For the first time, I was able to confront certain thought patterns that had been dominant in my head about myself and about other people and how I apply myself in the world. I was able to challenge trauma related thought patterns that control my everyday behavior. It helped me better understand myself and helped focus my thoughts more around positive reinforcement and not negative self criticism and self doubt. Self doubt is one of the most difficult things to cope with. DMT helped me confront this self doubt that I didn't know was so prevalent. I understood that I had self conscious issues, but when I had this experience, it was I was able to think about it in a way that I just never had before. Meditating on these experiences and contemplating them after having them is one of the most important things to integrating an insight that you can have from a dimethyltryptamine experience. It was the last experience I had during that week of using DMT. The ones before it were quite, well, more tame. One of the experiences I had, which I mentioned earlier, that I had an open eyes, open visual experience. I turned the Dolby Vision on the TV, where it's basically just showing beautiful video and images of the earth, people, animals, beautiful landscapes. When I did the DMT, I happened to take enough at one point and I held my eyes open, and it again was very fascinating. It was the first time I took enough DMT to trip while keeping my eyes open, and I was just staring like, it was quite fascinating, and seeing the shapes of nature and buildings. I remember seeing this city, maybe like a city in Mexico or Italy or something. Just these beautiful structures, just alive, and the colors were so enhanced. The first time I did DMT was one of the most memorable times I did DMT, and I remember every visual aspect from it, at least most of every visual aspect. The first time I did DMT, and I had atmospheric space music, meditation music playing in the background, and I take it, and on my couch in my living room, I close my eyes and I drift back, and I fall into bliss. I see an entity, a football head-shaped entity that uses its arms, extending its arms in different, creating fractals while it's doing this, and then I fall into an endless room with like this hourglass shape behind me. And then I saw myself falling, actually, another out-of-body experience. Then I was like in this endless hallway with sterile light, and then this wall opens up in front of me. When the wall opens up, I see Jonah Hill, the actor, drinking a big gulp, and he like melts away. I'm not really too sure what that was about, but... And then after that, I was just flying. I was flying through these pastel spheres of color, just drifting over my vision, and I was hearing voices. I remember one of the voices telling me,
DMT fucks with your head.
it was really silly, and I also remember hearing my own, voice, my inner voice go, that's the sound of me being in, utter awe and bliss. When I came back, I was laughing like a psych patient.
God. Oh my fucking god, dude. Holy fucking shit. Oh my god, that was fucking crazy. Oh my god. I don't know right what just the fuck happened. Oh my god.
Most of the experiences I've had under DMT have been overwhelmingly positive, and I endorse the experience. I think it's something that can be very beneficial for people. Now, I will point out the most negative experience I had while doing DMT was purely through fault of my own. I made a mistake while doing DMT once. I had my dog with me, and I went into these kind of like this park, these woods, and the middle of town. And granted, it was kind of obscured. I had DMT in a oneie with some hemp, and then I lit it and I smoked it. First, what happens is I end up swallowing ember, and it kind of burns my throat and kind of starts to ruin the experience a little bit. But I'm thinking, you know what? It's okay. And I'm trying to be cool about it, see? I take a swig of water, I have water ready with me. Now my dog gets a little impatient, and she coughs. That sound is so jarring, especially when you're high on DMT. The come up was starting, and I was trying to be calm, but then my dog goes like that, and I'm just like, gah. So I try to be like, you know, it's okay, she just had to cough, it's fine. Then she does it a second time, and I'm all like, you know what, it's time to go. So I decide, I stand up, and I start to leave. I'm gonna walk through the neighborhood to my car and just chill a little bit and just be tripping, bro. I was actually wearing a shirt that said trippin' on it, so it would have made sense. The thing about it was, there was the path that I took to find this little kind of secluded little rock that I was sitting on. There was a downed kind of bush or tree over it. I had to crouch to go under the bush, and the tree, whap, hits me right in my shoulder because I'm not paying attention. I drop stuff, and it hurts like a motherfucker. It's kind of a humbling experience because immediately after that, all I did was laugh. It fucking hurt, but all I could do was feel like, you know what? This is my fault. All of this is because of me. I made a stupid decision that day. I also had to drive about 20 minutes after having done this. So again, this was just a dumb idea. But it was a learning experience. DMT was humbling me. It was like the universe reached out and punched me in the shoulder to tell me, hey man, you're kind of fucking doing it wrong. And I took the message. But that was not the only time I had done it outdoors. One time, I did it on a walking trail, a cross-city walking trail, and it's near this highway and a lake, It's between the highway and the lake. And the highway is up this hill. You can't see the highway, but you can hear it a little bit. And then there's this lake, and then there's the railroad tracks, and I can see the city in the distance, but mostly kind of trees and weeds around me, right? It was a clear blue sky, and my wife was kind of trip-sitting me. She was walking with me. I look down both directions of the trailhead, and I see, hey, there's nobody. Nobody as far as I can see. It was a very straight trail, so I can see about a mile in either direction, right? Probably wasn't a mile long. It was shorter than that, but you get the idea. It was a very long trail that I could see with enough time to gauge whether or not I'm alone. This was another time where I did it with the oney. In fact, this was probably before the negative experience I had doing it outside with my dog. I take the hit. Is one hit 20 milligrams, probably. But it's enough that I take it, I hold it, and I exhale, and then I look to the sky. I remember the blue sky and the clouds, and it felt so endless. And then it started pulsating. The sky almost started looking digital, like some kind of holographic projection. I remember seeing the clouds pulsate. And I just felt so happy to be with my wife. I felt so grateful for life. I felt grateful for the butterflies, the bees, the sky, the breeze, just the grass, just the wind on the grass looked so beautiful. Another experience I had outside while in a semi-public place, well, this was more of a public place, I did DMT on the beach. Now, again, don't do what I did, but I will say I had a good time, a good experience with this. This was not an overwhelmingly negative experience. I did suffer from a little paranoid thoughts that maybe people were looking at me, judging me, maybe kind of inherently knew that I was high or something, but again, don't do what I did, but I will tell you, I had a good time. I stood in the water on the beach. Now, the shallow water, like about up to my thighs, up to my knees, right? And I'm standing out there, and it's a beautiful sunny day, and it's warm, and the water is kind of cold, and I go out there with a oney. At this point, marijuana is legal in Minnesota, so my impression was like, if I go out there and I hit a oney, people are probably thinking I'm just smoking weed on the beach, and nobody is gonna really bother me because it just looks like I'm smoking weed out there. And I knew that I wasn't going to freak out, and I wasn't gonna get so high that I fall into the water or something like that. I did it on the beach, and I felt fine, just comfortable doing it. I remember the water looking four-dimensional almost, like seeing like thousands of little miniature waves. It's almost like when you look at something that's 3D and you see a couple layers to it. There were like these, like this kind of greenish layer and then this reddish layer and then the middle layer with like all of the light spectrum. It was very odd. I was so lost in the infinite waves of the water. And then I look out to the city across the lake, and then I look to the horizon, and I just look around me, and I look to the sky and everything, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm just having a moment, and and I'm able to close my eyes and just be present in this moment of infinity. It was by far one of the most fun experiences I had in that moment. After standing out there for a while, I look around and I see like this older woman that's on her phone, and she's kind of looking at me, and I start getting a little anxious, like maybe she's like talking to someone about me, maybe she's calling the cops, maybe she thinks I'm doing hard drugs on the beach, bro. So I decide to walk back to our spot. I sit down next to my wife on our blanket on the beach, and I start meditating. I close my eyes and I breathe, and I focus on my heart rate and my breathing, and it relieves the anxiety and it relieves the paranoia, because I'm just a bro minding his business, bro. I'm just a dude sitting on the beach being quiet, not freaking out. I look like I smoked something out there, but whatever it was, I came back, I sat down, I wasn't bothering anyone, I wasn't being a public nuisance, I wasn't yelling and screaming and kicking and freaking out. I wasn't overdosing on anything. I was just having a nice little fun temporary psychedelic experience. One of the experiences I forgot to mention, two of them that I found kind of interesting. One time I remember seeing this guy that I call the Dark Rider. I'll try to draw him sometime. He had like this like hat, like this kind of like round brimmed hat and like this trench coat, and there were colors. There was like this circular kind of geometry around him when he showed up to me. He had a shotgun in like a sawn-off shotgun in one hand, and he was riding, I swear, like a black horse, like a dark, like some kind of dark ethereal interdimensional horse. That's why I call him the Dark Rider. And he said something profound that I can't really remember exactly, but it was about like how he's on his way to destroy established systems of order or something, that I was like, whoa, okay. And then he just left, and I was like, oh, bye. He kind of reminded me of the demon guy, especially from the Disturbed music video, The Dark Messiah. That's kind of the energy he elicited. And he kind of looked like cartoony, similar to the Samurai Jack cartoons. He kind of had that aesthetic, and he had like long black hair. One vision I had before that, where I realized that my favorite combination of colors together are like green, purple, blue, pink, and like reds together. When I was just seeing like these spirals of like color shapes, which kind of inspired the thumbnail for the video. This purple guy runs up to me and just like opens his mouth like, and I go into his mouth, and he kind of looked freaky. Like in some contexts, people would be like, oh, that's creepy. But I was just like, I was like, oh man. And yeah, it's like this spiral down his throat into like more geometry. It wasn't a very deep experience. I was very present, minorly perceptual. But I remember seeing it, just sitting there on the couch, closing my eyes, and seeing this purple guy run up and swallow me whole, and I fall into a spiral of geometry. I've had other experiences that I could go on ad infinitum about how I feel. But suffice it to say that I have had very many experiences while using DMT, and I have been fine 100% of the time after the come down. I have never been traumatized from any of these experiences. In fact, I'm a person already with trauma. I feel like DMT has helped me confront my trauma in a way that antidepressants or marijuana really hasn't helped me do before. In fact, marijuana could be negatively associated with some of my anxiety and depression. That's not to say that, marijuana in and of itself is inherently bad. Again, I think everyone should be able to do whatever drug they want, and I've said this 1,000 billion times, and I'll say it 1,000 billion more. But I just want to stress that under no circumstance have I ever done DMT and felt like I ruined my life afterwards. I didn't feel like I ruined my brain. I didn't feel like I ruined my life. I didn't feel like I ruined any relationships. I felt fine afterwards. It is a very intense 15 minutes. And then you fart, and then you're kind of hungry later. And guess what? I'm going to be sitting on the toilet, peeing and pooping, thinking about, hey, that was fun. I want to do it again sometime. I have never felt like I traumatized myself while using DMT. I have never felt like I wanted to jump out of a window. I have never felt like I could fly or had superpowers or that there are aliens all around me. I have never felt like I altered my brain chemistry drastically in a negative way using DMT. It is a very potent, very powerful 15-20 minutes out of your life. That just 15, 20 minutes of life that you experienced the night before kind of just helps you look at things in a different way for a temporary period of time. And again, psychedelics like DMT help contribute to neuroplasticity, where it's literally helping your brain grow more. I think people who do psychedelics are more intelligent than your average sober square who never does psychedelics and in fact tries to abstain from even jacking off. I think that's unhealthy. One thing I forgot to mention in this video is how it's almost like simulation of how it feels to die. So when you're experiencing a really deep, heavy experience, sometimes it almost feels like you're leaving your body and that you're about to slip into death. And that, some people would say, well, that sounds counterintuitive. Why would you want to feel like you're dying? And it's a fair question, but the way I see it, it helped me overcome a fear of death. So in a way, it wasn't just about the death simulation. It wasn't just about the feeling. It was about confronting that feeling, that element of leaving your body behind and getting over it. Because once you confront it enough times, it's like, it's not scary anymore. Like, I don't fear death anymore. I mean, I don't want to die. I want to live out this mortal shell's existence, for as long as it goes. But the experience of shifting the state of your consciousness into what feels like the afterlife. It's like one of the most fascinating things. That's another area where I think there's value in that at least I overcame my fear of death. And it was thanks to just this little tiny molecule. I look different. I want to go over kind of the safety protocols of doing DMT. You should never do DMT around people you don't know, in environments you've never been in before, and even in a friend's house. I guess it's mostly up to you as to how comfortable you feel, but the advice I would offer is very, very strict. The first time I did DMT, it was in my living room, and I felt safe in my living room. But if you can, do it in your bedroom. I mean, that's the place where you rest your head at night. It's where you sleep. What place could you feel more safe than in your bedroom, on your bed? And preferably, do it on a bed anyway, because it's nicer to just kind of, once it takes hold, to just kind of fall back. Have a trip sitter or multiple trip sitters, people who truly care for you, that you know love you, and that you love them. People you know who aren't going to take advantage of you or negatively influence your experience in any way, shape, or form. And we're still talking about NN-DMT. 5-MeO DMT is different in its structure, and you can overdose on 5-MeO DMT, where you cannot overdose on NN-DMT. The closest you can come to an overdose on NMDMT is that you just can't do it anymore and you pass out and go to Never Never Land. And then you return 20 to 30 minutes later going, holy shit, I just lived 10,000 lifetimes. I've never lived 10,000 lifetimes, but I think that would be fascinating. And make sure that what you actually have is NN-DMT. Know what it looks like. NN-DMT looks like a white to yellowish crystalline powder. It's a crystal, and it's best if it's the purest form of an NDMT looks pretty white, and the less pure version of NN-DMT looks more yellow, and that's due to the plant fats that come out of the Mimosa hostilis root bark. Depending on a person's extraction method, it can have more or less plant fats, and the more plant fats that are in it, it means that there's also more alkaloids, and it can even affect the trip, like the quality of the trip. Some people like yellow NNDMT versus white NNDMT. I can't really say for certain just yet. When I do more pure white NNDMT, I tend to have very, very crisp kind of experience where I almost feel more present. DMT that is either have been burned or has more plant fats in it, there seems to be kind of a heavier come on. There may even be a more intense uplift as the trip is starting to take hold. Have a safety protocol in place. It's best not to call an ambulance if you start to feel scared or paranoid that you might be dying, if you know what you have is DMT, because that's kind of what it's going to feel like the first time you really go into it. If you try to fight the trip, it's going to be a negative experience. It will raise your heart rate, but not enough for you to die. Do not use NNDMT in a bathtub. You can drown. I heard a story of a gentleman who tried to basically, I think he was trying to make his own sensory deprivation tank, and he ended up really having a death trip. He drowned in his bathtub because he smoked DMT and he took enough where he went under and then drowned. You don't drown on NNDMT if you're laying in your bed or on your couch. Have stuff around you to ground you. Now, we've talked about having, trip sitters, we've talked about doing in a safe space, but make sure you have cold water next to you in case you need to take a sip of water. That can help relieve anxiety, is cold water. Another thing that might help is to have like a favorite candy or some kind of snack around you, either before or after you lift off. It's nice to take in some of the earthly pleasures before you shift dimensions to another realm. It'll help you grow to appreciate this reality more. And when you're, say, snacking on, I have vegan Snickers, which are jokers. That's one of my favorite candies. Oftentimes I'll have one immediately after a trip. Holy crap. To taste every nanosecond of taste, the caramel and peanut butter and nougat and chocolate over your tongue is quite amazing. Preferably don't do it outside on your first time. If you ever do DMT outside, make sure it's in the most secluded place you can possibly find. Nobody's gonna come up on you. And again, have people around you as a kind of security to make sure that people are gonna be there looking out for you. Even if it takes months, if you manage to come into possession of it, don't do it right away. Honestly, I would encourage people to use reagents, a test kit, to even make sure that what they have is DMT. Personally, I didn't do that. I just trusted my source, and my source was pretty good. Now I really don't have to worry about sources. That's a tidbit of information for another day. I find it helps to meditate before doing DMT. Breathing, count your breaths, close your eyes, and just contemplate your heartbeat and your existence, and think about things that make you feel good. Think about people you love. Think about places you've been. Picture a nice memory from your childhood and think about that. Think about positive, life-affirming thoughts. Don't think about fear before doing an NDMT, before vaporizing it. Once you hold it in your breath for 20 to 30 seconds, if you take another one, it's gonna bring you even deeper. If you're doing it for the first time, my suggestion would be to take only a small puff and hold it in for about 10-20 seconds. Don't do more than 10 milligrams. Do less than 10 milligrams. Do a tiny pinch of it on some, if all you got to work with is some cannabis flower or whatever, it's going to feel different. And my advice is to acclimate yourself to that experience. Once it goes in your body, it's gonna feel like nothing you've ever felt before. What I did, I vaporized a little bit of it, sat for about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. Like, I had to get used to it. The room started going, my living room elongated, and I just had to be like, whoa, This is different. And that's what it's going to be like. Make sure you take all of the precautions necessary to make sure you have a successful, safe, and welcoming trip. I don't want novices having a bad trip on their first DMT experience, because honestly, it has a lot more to offer than terror. I'd like to talk about the after effect. Now, after doing DMT, your brain is going to be contemplating what just happened. It's best to wait for a while before doing it again. Even if you had a very small, short-term trip, don't jump back into it right away. It's best to kind of just collect yourself and think on what just happened for, for however long it takes, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month or more. Give yourself time to really take in all that just happened and to think about it. And if you really want to do it, do it again. But just kind of give yourself some time. It's going to alter your thought patterns and how you see life and people. It really can make you reevaluate the path you're going on in life, and it will really help you sit with thoughts that you started having while under the experience that you never thought you had. It's like a key that fits into the back of your subconscious. Picture your subconscious as this giant dark attic, and you have a key to some chest buried behind 10,000 boxes, and this chest has components that go to every other thing in your attic that you didn't even know were missing. DMT is like that key going into the chest, opening it up, and just all of this crap starts coming out. When my wife does DMT, and it's not every time, but sometimes she'll cry. It can be normal to cry when doing DMT, especially if you have a lot of past trauma. It's helping your brain rewire how you think about your past experiences. The best way I can articulate it is it's almost like hyper connecting your brain. And I've heard it described as this, but like all of the opinions that you might have that can be contradictory to one another happen all at once. Human beings are just walking bags of contradictions, right? We have all of these opinions and thoughts and belief systems, right? But when we really challenge ourselves on our belief systems, on our opinions, cognitive dissonance kicks in, right? There's a defense for one opinion, there's a defense for another opinion, and this and that, and it's blah, 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 blah. It's a clusterfuck. Our brains are clusterfucks that we fail to understand. And when I'm under this experience, at least the way I can articulate it, instead of just, I'm working on one medium, it's like a bunch of channels open up at the same time, and like I'm hearing all of these frequencies simultaneously. And I think that is very valuable because it helps you challenge your previous belief systems, things that you held onto, your opinions and thoughts of other people, of how the world works, and just your general life experience. It challenges the way in which you frame life. For me, it gave me the ability to be more grateful. I was more grateful for things. I never really practiced gratefulness. I tried practicing mindfulness prior to DMT use, and I found that to be difficult, but manageable. Now, I'm just grateful for things. Now I know that my irritability is coming from me and how I think and react to world and life events. If things that are happening in my life making me irritable, and it's a nuclear reaction every time I drop a fork, kick my toe, or whatever it is, whatever happens in life, something that could be petty to kind of small problems that kind of add up. It's like my brain is a bucket full of stuff, right? And it's like that shit sloshing around in there, and then it's just spillage, and it's chaos. DMT helps me navigate that chaos and isolate the different parts of myself that are being distracted and accosted by all of my worries. I'm a worrier, and it gets to me. What I need to do is learn to reframe how I'm worrying about things and what I'm allowing these fears and phobias to do to myself in my day-to-day. It's like if you're low on vitamin B12, iron, D3, vitamin D, whatever it is, it's going to affect your overall mood in the same way if you're hungover. That'll affect your overall mood. If you haven't eaten for more than 9 hours, that will affect your overall mood. If you haven't had enough water, it's all of these little things build up. I have found that it's really helpful for me to reframing and rewiring how I behave and interact in the world. This is a video of me exactly one day, the next day after my very first DMT use. I was just happy, and this is how I was. This is the day after I have tried DMT, the first time in my life. I'm just enjoying the day. I'm enjoying existence. You can see Duluth, you can see Superior out there. That's Canal Park, actually. Duluth's over here, but it's, for me personally, altered the way I feel about things. Legitimately, I'm still me, but little things that cause irritability, just the little shit that doesn't really matter, like my phone not working or a computer not working or something, I'll still verbally externalize the frustration, verbally. But when it comes to the actual sensation of irritation, it's there, but it's been reduced, massively reduced. We just live in a hamster wheel. We all live in a hamster wheel. Look at people, you look at all the NPCs, I'll refer to them as, like other people who aren't you, non-player characters, right? NPCs, everyone going about their lives, people who haven't experienced this, this wonderful molecule. People going about their lives in this society, just accepting everything as it is at face value. More than you realize, you accept things at face value. But it is a beautiful day. And sometimes just, hey, don't worry about it. Don't sweat the small shit. Everything will be okay. Can't say that for everyone, but those of you who do have things, who have loved ones, who have things that you can say you're grateful for, just admit that you're grateful for. I think DMT can really help unify this world in a way that not a lot of other things do, in a way that we don't really think that we might need. The political and spiritual implications of DMT are extremely significant. As I said, it helps you challenge your prior opinions and belief systems. So if we can use DMT as a way, in a ceremonial fashion, and make it a more traditional part of our everyday culture to utilize psychedelics, I think, honestly, I believe this world would become more unified. People would become more connected, because it helps you realize how connected you are to everything around you. If it was done in a social setting, if it was done in the similar to how people, there are ayahuasca retreats, expensive retreats that people like me, poor people, can't afford to go to. If it was made available to adults every day, I think we would see a significant shift in the paradigm of how people behave with one another. I think that it would definitely help when it comes to political division, when it comes to religious and spiritual division, secular community versus the religious community. Now, again, personally, I'm an atheist. I don't subscribe to any deity. But I think If people were able to unlock their minds and realize how cosmically connected we all are, we're all made up of stardust. Now, that's a thing atheists say, right? Well, we're all just stardust. You don't really realize what it feels like. You know, it's kind of intuitive, you know, hey, we're all stardust, we're all made up of the same crap, so let's not fight and kill one another. But then when you introduce this stardust to your brain and cause this chemical reaction, like with other psychedelics, starts this process that makes you realize just how connected we all are. We do not live in a symbiotic society. We live in a society built on war, profit, and greed, resource hoarding. The type of society we live in diminishes who we are as human beings down to literal pawns on a chessboard. We are played like a game. Everything is a game. The drug war is a game. The drug war is a human rights violation that does not do anything to help people with addiction. It doesn't help people with mental health crises. It doesn't help create a more peaceful society. It does the opposite. When people are being arrested for possession of anything, you're not helping the issue. You're not addressing what's causing people to seek these experiences. Adults are going to seek pleasure and avoid pain. If there is pain in someone's life and heroin literally makes them forget about their problems, they're going to do heroin. If it's meth, if it's cocaine and crack, whatever it is, it helps people forget their problems. In the same way alcohol helps people forget their problems. Psychedelics are different. In fact, it could even be argued to some extent that methamphetamine at a high enough dose is a psychedelic experience. We give children Adderall and we don't blink twice, but when an adult wants to use unprescribed methamphetamine, we look at as they're a problem. I'm not saying I enjoy the company of erratic tweakers, but I do not think that locking people up for cheap labor of the state is going to do anything to help anybody when it comes to drug use. Me using DMT should be my human right, in the same way using LSD and psilocybin should be a human right. There have been studies that prove psilocybin is beneficial when it comes to therapy, when it comes to mental health breakthroughs. If we legalized all of these drugs, then we would have an easier time learning about the pros and cons of it. Not just stigmatize all of these people who use one drug as problem people. Look what happened when we legalized marijuana in more and more places. Minnesota recently legalized marijuana. And guess what? We finally discovered that extended heavy use of marijuana contributes to cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. After years of heavy use, you can end up having a condition where you vomit, where you have headaches, where you can't get good sleep. People use marijuana for anxiety. I used to use it for anxiety, and once I stopped using it, I would get anxiety. I realized that the problem was associated with me, not with the plant. It's not normal to constantly be inhaling the smoke of a flower. We can live without smoking marijuana. Marijuana can be useful. In the same way, if you take too much ibuprofen, if you use, an NSAID for a lot, you can end up damaging your liver. You can cause your stomach to bleed. Good things can do bad things too. And we have learned that because we have allowed adults to just take the risks like adults should be allowed to do. Every time you get in your car, you risk getting annihilated by some irresponsible driver and your car exploding. You risk dying literally every day you drive, and we don't prevent adults from driving. How many people die in car wrecks? We don't ban cars, and we haven't banned alcohol, even though alcohol causes more economic damage than even methamphetamine use does. It damages relationships. And drunk driving, guess what? Just associated with cars. How about we ban alcohol and cars? If we really want to protect people, let's ban alcohol and cars. No, we're not going to do that, because the drug war picks and chooses what it wants to regulate and enforce over. And it has nothing to do with protecting people. It's all about control, because it's a huge, massive game. So, at the end of the day, this is the best I can say. It's helped me. DMT has helped me, and I intend on using DMT long into the future. I'm doing a current thing where I use DMT once every 50 days. I used DMT recently, and I discovered how to properly vaporize it in a vaporizer. My more recent use of it has prompted me to draw more. It's given me the willpower to be more artistic, to write more, to draw more, and utilizing DMT as a method of depression and anxiety management, and my overall sense of well-being and control over my own emotions, I think it has a lot of promise for a significant number of people. And I think it's an absolute crime against humanity for these type of substances to be illegal. It cannot be overstated just how egregious and disgusting that police officers are allowed to cage people and force them to do cheap labor for the state, all because they altered their consciousness, tweaked their brains in a way that helped them think differently. Because according to the FBI and the DEA and the federal government, DMT is wrong think. It's wrong think. They don't want you thinking in the way that DMT makes you think. That's why it's illegal. Because if you start thinking too much, then you become too much of a problem. And they don't want people thinking. They want people distracted. And they want people depressed. They want you smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol, driving gas-guzzling cars on your way to your time-consuming, life-sucking job, where every day is just a day to survive to the next day. So you can make rent money so that you don't go homeless, and maybe you can afford dinner. I'm getting too out of topic right now, but yeah. So again, it's all connected, and I really think that DMT has its positives. Pros outweigh the cons when it comes to DMT, at least in my experience. Let me know what you think, and I will see you later. I've got bags under my eyes, I'm tired. A few final thoughts I have about the whole using DMT thing. I want to preempt anybody from suggesting that I am addicted to DMT. Personally, I do not think I'm addicted to DMT. Again, I'll reiterate that I am using it once every 50 days. Usually an addiction is classified as something that begins to negatively impact your life. It's the exact opposite with DMT. I began using it, and I basically just use it as an antidepressant. Though unprescribed, I wouldn't say that I'm addicted to DMT any more than someone is addicted to bupropion or, venlafaxine or whatever really works for them when it comes to moderating their depression or anxiety. I use it responsibly. It's not harming my life. I would also like to preempt anyone who would want to suggest that DMT makes you crazy. Again, there is no data that suggests using DMT causes dissociation or psychosis or any mental health disorders. It's possible that people who use DMT and end up acting more erratic afterhand are already dealing with some kind of underlying condition that they just began focusing on more after using DMT. I remember watching a video of a gentleman who said that he began having trouble sleeping
and his tinnitus became so bad that he has insomnia. This gentleman did say that he had tinnitus before ever using DMT, like he had it since he was a teenager. So it wasn't the DMT that caused his tinnitus. Just post using DMT, he was focusing on it more. I don't know if the two are correlated or if it's just that the tinnitus simply got worse. I'm not going to downplay the idea that DMT had any impact whatsoever on his tinnitus. I haven't really hallucinated anything bizarre after using DMT. I will say I had this one occurrence happen after smoking marijuana after having used DMT. I kind of felt like my consciousness was louder and speaking at me other than me just like having thoughts. And it almost kind of felt like for a second like my vision warped a little bit, but it could have just been the fact that I haven't smoked marijuana in a long time, and because of my ADHD brain, there's a lot going on up here. It wasn't anything serious. I didn't feel like voices were compelling me to do anything. I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel negative. And it was only while I was stoned. Like, when I wasn't stoned after that point, it wasn't happening anymore. And I've taken edibles since then, and had never really experienced that before, so that just really could have just been a one-off weird thing. It could have more to do with the fact that I was smoking the plant than just consuming it via edible. Again, I don't really smoke weed much anymore because it gives me paranoia and anxiety. I don't like it, and it costs money. And as for craziness, you can be a crazy person prior to doing DMT or prior to doing any psychedelic. And then once you do the psychedelic thereafter, you just become more of who you already are. You start acting more like you would if you had no filter. And I think people correlate using psychedelics with a kind of craziness in people thereafter. I don't believe this is true. In fact, I think the issue lies with people who are not either not introspective enough or who just have their proclivities that they don't know they have, and they express them, they are embellished after using psychedelics, after using anything from LSD to psilocybin, mescaline, salvia divinorum, or DMT or ketamine or whatever it is. I don't like the narrative that psychedelics can make people crazy. People already are crazy without psychedelics. I don't think it's inherently the psychedelics making people crazy. I think it's the structure of society that makes people crazy. And then when people use psychedelics, they have a form of catharsis, and they act out after exposing their brains to these chemicals. Once the chemical's gone, the chemical's gone. It's not in their brains anymore. But it just changes their behavior thereafter. Sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's negative. That is true for literally anything. People drink alcohol, people snort cocaine, people do heroin, people smoke meth. Sometimes people don't like any of those things, and sometimes people do. Some people will smoke meth once and they never want to again because they hated it. Other people, they'll smoke meth and they'll continue doing it because they really, really love it. I don't think addiction to anything is good, but I would not classify what I have, the relationship I have with DMT, as an addiction. It is a tool that I use often to alleviate anxiety and symptoms of depression, and as a tool to explore myself. I don't use it every day. There have been times where I used it maybe once a day for 3 days, once a day for 6 days. There have been times when I go a couple weeks, and then I use it once, and then I go longer. Since October, I have been using it once every 50 days. I don't call that an addiction. I call that self-medicating. Self-prescribed medical dosing. Self-prescribed medicinal use. I am not abusing DMT, whereas I will actually admit that there was a time when I felt like I was abusing DMT. You know why? Because the DMT told me I was. And what did I do? I stopped. I didn't stop using the drug entirely. I stopped misusing it. Using it too much. And that's the difference between DMT and a lot of other drugs. Is like, you can abuse things like meth, you can abuse things like heroin. DMT is a type of molecule that it's very difficult to abuse. And again, people who are crazy, who are already kind of cuckoo, not to stigmatize mental illness. Again, I struggle with things. But people who actually do abuse DMT or ayahuasca, or whatever it is, it's hard to blame the drug itself on it. There was already something going on in these people's lives that caused them to have a downward spiral. And they were already susceptible people. You're extremely susceptible when you have low confidence and other insecurities. And if you're around the wrong people or in the wrong environment and you're using DMT, it, yes, can definitely negatively affect you. Any psychedelic can negatively affect you based on what your environmental stimuli is. If you're around, bad friends or people who really aren't friends, or if you live in a chaotic place, everything around you is just so difficult to consume, or your environment is just a general toxic environment, yes, of course it's going to negatively affect you. I would never suggest that DMT can do no harm to anybody. It's about setting, dose, and what your intention for using the drug is. If you don't have a good intention, you're not going to get good results. I believe it was Dr. Carl Hart in his book, Drug Use for Grown-Ups. He described it as people don't want to read, listen to, or watch a story about a person who does psychedelics and doesn't go crazy. It's not salacious enough, it's not entertaining, it's not attention grabbing. So it's like, oh, you did mushrooms and DMT and you turned out fine? Boring. Nobody cares. Nobody cares when nothing bad happens. They only care when something bad does happen. So they can point to it, mock it, and laugh and say, don't do drugs, kids. Also, when you tell kids don't do drugs, isn't that just gonna make them do it? You tell a kid not to do something, they're going to do it more. It's more likely that they'll do it. What did I learn from the DARE officer that came to my 5th grade class? Nothing. I learned absolutely nothing about drugs. I didn't learn why they're bad. I didn't learn about addiction. I didn't learn about anything, really. I was told, don't do drugs, kids. I think that is a very good way to put it, because people just don't care.
Hey y'all, if you liked that video, please consider subscribing, and remember to absolutely violate that like button. Check out some of my other videos if you wish, and stick around for more content to come eventually.